They spent 17 years behind bars for a murder the LA County District Attorney says they did not commit.
A sentence of 50 to life for something I had absolutely nothing to do with.
Imagine spending years, maybe even decades, behind bars for a crime you didn't commit. The world moves on without you. Your name is tarnished, and every day feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from. Then, one day, the truth finally comes out. You're free. But what does that moment actually look like? How does it feel to walk out of prison, knowing you lost time you'll never get back? Join us as we dive into the most emotional, raw, and unbelievable reactions of innocent people finally set free. Clemente Aguirre-Jarquin. On the morning of June 17, 2024, a tragedy shocked Altamonte Springs, Florida. At 121 Vagabond Way, 47-year-old Cheryl Williams and her 68-year-old grandmother, Carol Blaise, were found dead in their home. Cheryl had been stabbed 129 times, and her body blocked the front door. Carol, who was partly paralyzed after a stroke and used a wheelchair, lay on the living room floor with 2 deep cuts. The brutal crime left the neighborhood in disbelief. Mark Van Sant, a local man, discovered the scene when he stopped by to pick up clothes for his girlfriend, Samantha Williams. Samantha, who lived with Cheryl and Carol, was both the daughter and granddaughter of the victims. She and Mark had spent the previous night together, and the grim discovery came the next morning. Soon, police arrived and began to investigate. Evidence quickly pointed to a young man named Clemente Aguirre-Jarquin, a 24-year-old who lived next door at 117 Vagabond Way with 2 roommates. Clemente worked at a local restaurant, washing dishes and prepping food. He had come to the United States illegally from Honduras after fleeing dangerous drug traffickers. A bloody 10-inch kitchen knife was found between the 2 houses. This knife matched one missing from the restaurant, and blood from both victims was on it. Many bloody shoe prints matching Clemente's shoes were also found at the scene. When questioned by the police, Clemente said he had gone next door early that morning to borrow beer after running out at home. He claimed that when he entered through an unlocked door, he found Cheryl's body and then Carol's. He said he tried to revive Cheryl but was too shocked to act. Fearing that the killer might still be inside, he picked up the knife and later left it in the grass. He did not call the police because he was afraid of deportation. However, the evidence did not support his story. In February 2006, Clemente was tried for first-degree murder and burglary. Many witnesses testified, including Samantha, who recalled troubling encounters with him before. Experts described the many wounds on the victims, and blood and fingerprint tests seemed to tie him to the crime. The jury convicted him, and he was sentenced to death. Over the years, evidence emerged. A fingerprint expert's work was found mistaken, and DNA tests showed that Clemente's DNA was not at the scene. Instead, Samantha's DNA was found in several key spots. Multiple witnesses testified that Samantha had confessed to the murders. In October 2016, the Florida Supreme Court ordered a new trial, and in November 2018, the charges against Clemente were dropped. He said, "I do know that nobody believed me back then. But today is a brighter day, a new day, and I've got hopes for the future." Devonte Sanford. Imagine being just 14 years old, standing outside your home in your pajamas, when the police suddenly take you away. No explanation, no parents, no lawyer, just endless hours of questioning. That's exactly what happened to Devonte Sanford in 2007. What followed was a nightmare of injustice, deception, and betrayal that would steal nearly a decade of his life. On the night of September 17, 2007, 4 people were shot and killed inside a drug house on Runyon Street in Detroit. The crime was brutal, and the police were desperate for answers. While canvassing the neighborhood, they spotted Devonte, a legally blind teenager with developmental disabilities, standing in his front yard. Without any real reason, they picked him up and took him to the station for questioning. the interrogation was relentless. For over 24 hours, without an attorney, without his parents, and without any rest, Devonte was subjected to intense pressure. The police accused him repeatedly, lied to him about having evidence, including fake claims of blood on his shoes, and even told him that he could go home if he just confessed. Eventually, exhausted and confused, Devonte broke down. He gave them the confession they wanted. But there was a major problem. His confession made no sense. He got key details of the crime completely wrong. Things like the number of shooters, the weapons used, and how the victims were killed. Any objective look at his statements would have raised immediate red flags. Despite the glaring issues with Devonte's confession, the justice system failed him at every turn. His defense attorney never argued to suppress the confession, never challenged the detectives, and never pointed out the obvious flaws in the case. Seeing no way out, Devonte pleaded guilty in the middle of his trial. He was sentenced to 39 to 92 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Just 2 weeks later, the truth started to come out. Vincent Smothers, a professional hitman, was arrested in connection with multiple murders across Detroit. To the shock of investigators, he freely admitted that he and an accomplice, not a teenage boy, were responsible for the Runyon Street killings. His confession was highly detailed, matched the crime scene perfectly, and even revealed new facts that police hadn't known before. To remove all doubt, Smothers even led police to one of the murder weapons. Ballistics confirmed it was a perfect match. There was no question, Smothers was telling the truth. But despite this, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office refused to act. In a shocking twist, prosecutors charged Smothers with every other murder he admitted to, except the Runyon Street killings. They even tried to strike a plea deal with him, but on one condition: he had to stay silent about Devonte. Smothers refused, stating, "It seemed ludicrous that the state would actually go this far to make sure Devonte Sanford remained in prison for crimes I committed and confessed to." It was clear, this wasn't about justice. It was about protecting the system. Devonte's case was taken up by the Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth and the Michigan Innocence Clinic. They filed a motion detailing the overwhelming evidence of his innocence, including a 30-page affidavit from Smothers himself. The case gained national attention, forcing the Michigan State Police to conduct a full reinvestigation. It took over a year, but their findings were undeniable. Devonte had nothing to do with the Runyon Street murders. They also uncovered evidence of police misconduct in his case. Finally, in 2016, nearly 9 years after his wrongful conviction, Wayne County prosecutors moved to dismiss all charges. Judge Brian Sullivan overturned Devonte's conviction and ordered his immediate release. He walked out of prison a free man, but not without scars. Despite all he had suffered, Devonte felt gratitude toward one man, Vincent Smothers. "He protected me, not the cops. The cops took advantage of me. It's because of this man that I'm able to walk, breathe, and just be at peace." Ricky Jackson. Ricky Jackson's story is one of deep sorrow, hard lessons, and finally, hope. On November 3, 2016, he visited Siena College to share his life journey, a tale that many find both heartbreaking and inspiring. At the tender age of 18, Ricky, along with 2 of his childhood friends, was accused of murder in Ohio. The case against him was built on shaky ground, with no strong evidence linking him to the crime. Instead, the only proof came from the words of a 13-year-old boy. Many believe this young witness was pushed by the police to say what they wanted to hear, making the whole trial deeply unfair. Back in 1975, Ricky faced a harsh fate. He was sentenced to death by electric chair, a sentence meant for the worst criminals. Ricky described death row as being like a dog kennel, where all of the dogs are being prepared to be euthanized, and they are left without any hope. His words show the deep pain and loss of hope he felt while waiting for a death he did not deserve. Later on, his sentence was changed to life in prison, meaning that he would spend his days behind bars with no chance to prove his innocence. For nearly 4 decades, Ricky Jackson lived a life of confinement. Every day behind those cold prison walls was a reminder of an error that had stolen his youth, his dreams, and precious time with his family. In his long years of isolation, the world outside moved on, and Ricky was left to cope with the injustice he faced. But even in the darkest moments, a spark of hope remained. The turning point in his long struggle came in 2013. The 13-year-old witness, whose testimony had once sealed his fate, finally admitted that his words were not true. This act of coming forward set in motion the events that would lead to Ricky's release. In 2014, after spending nearly 40 years in prison, he finally stepped out into the free world at the age of 57. The court in Ohio recognized the grave mistake that had been made. They awarded Ricky compensation for all the years lost, a sum that, as he put it, could never truly make up for lost experiences, lost memories of not being able to grow up with your siblings, or getting to know and thank your mother for everything she did. Even with this small measure of justice, Ricky's life had been irrevocably changed. Now, Ricky Jackson is beginning a new chapter. He has embraced life on the outside and recently got engaged, proving that even after such a long hardship, love and hope can bloom again. Remarkably, Ricky has chosen forgiveness over bitterness. He even met the young man whose words once led to his downfall and forgave him, showing a strength of character that few can match. Lawrence McKinney. In the early hours of October 2, 1977, a shocking crime took place in Memphis, Tennessee. At about 5 a.m., a woman was awakened in her second-floor bedroom by 2 men. One of the men carried a knife and forced his way into her room. He put his hand over her mouth and pressed the knife to her throat while demanding money. When she said she had none, both men raped her. They then stole her television set, which was later found in an empty building in the apartment complex where she lived. The woman recognized the attackers from her neighborhood. She called them Polly's boy and Ollie Mae's boy. Although she did not know all their names, she gave the first name of one and the address of the other. This key information helped the police begin their search for the criminals. The investigation started when police visited the home of 22-year-old Lawrence McKinney, but he was not there. Next, they went to Michael Yancey's home, where they found McKinney lying on a couch and Yancey hiding in a closet. Both men denied any involvement. Yancey said he hid because he thought the police were there for another reason. McKinney claimed that he and Yancey had spent the night drinking and watching television in Yancey's apartment, and they had not left. Yancey also argued that the woman was falsely accusing him to force his family out of the complex. On October 7, 1977, the police charged both men with rape and burglary. In May 1978, a trial was held in Shelby County Criminal District Court. The woman, whose name was kept secret, identified the 2 men as her attackers. A rape crisis worker, Lynn Lesack, testified that she had examined the woman and noted that she was very quiet and calm, as if in shock. A forensic expert confirmed that tests on the rape kit showed the presence of sperm. The jury convicted both men, sentencing each to 100 years for rape and 10 years for burglary. Years later, in 2008, Mr. Yancey asked for DNA tests on the evidence from the crime. The tests, done in 2009, clearly showed that the DNA on the bed linens came from 3 people: the woman's boyfriend, an unknown man, and Mr. Yancey. Mr. McKinney's DNA was not found. On July 17, 2009, his conviction was vacated, and he was released soon. After his release, Mr. McKinney fought to be officially cleared of all charges so that he could receive compensation. In 2010, he sought an official declaration of exoneration, but the Tennessee Board of Parole did not agree. He applied again in 2016 and was again rejected. Finally, in December 2017, Governor Bill Haslam officially exonerated him, clearing the way for a claim. Mr. McKinney then filed for $1 million, and in March 2018, the claim was approved. Gregory Counts and Van Dyke Perry. 19-year-old Gregory Counts and 21-year-old Van Dyke Perry spent years of their young lives behind bars for a crime they never committed. Their story is one of shattered lives, painful injustice, and the long road to finally seeing the truth come to light. It all began when a crime took place that would change their lives forever. The case was built on shaky ground, with testimony that later turned out to be completely false. In court, the weight of those false words led to life-changing decisions that neither Counts nor Perry had any part in. Their fate was sealed based on accusations and stories that were not true, stories that were later exposed for the lies they were. On April 24, 2018, an assistant district attorney and an investigator visited the home of a woman who had once taken the stand. They needed to hear her account of what had happened, hoping to piece together a clear picture of the events. In her modest living room, the woman recounted how she believed Mr. Perry and two other men had attacked her boyfriend. She claimed that on that night, they beat him up badly and even threatened to take his life. Her story was filled with twists and dark details, and it had been enough to convince a jury in the past that Gregory Counts and Van Dyke Perry were guilty. The details of her testimony were strange and hard to believe. According to her, her boyfriend had a secret life. He was said to have connections with men who would pay for sex with her. One night, she said, a man had refused to pay him, and in response, her boyfriend had beaten her when she came home without money. The violence did not end there. The woman explained that her boyfriend later told her that the problems between them would disappear if she accused the men who had beaten him of raping her. In a confusing mix of anger, fear, and desperation, she followed his advice, testifying in court against Counts and Perry. But the turning point came when she admitted something very important. She confessed that her testimony was not the honest account it was supposed to be. She said that she had only taken the stand because she had been brought to court on a material witness warrant, a legal tool that forces someone to testify even if they might not want to. She told the authorities that her earlier words were not true and that she was deeply sorry for the harm her false testimony had caused. Her admission revealed that the entire case against Counts and Perry was built on lies. Less than a month later, on May 7, 2018, a significant change came over the legal system. New York County District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. joined forces with attorneys from the Innocence Project and the Office of the Appellate Defender. Together, they filed a joint motion to vacate the convictions of Gregory Counts and Van Dyke Perry. This motion was a clear statement that the state now recognized the mistake that had been made. The decision to dismiss the convictions was not made lightly. It came after long, hard work by many people who believed that these two young men had suffered a grave injustice. When Counts and Perry sat in court that day, the room was filled with a sound that carried hope and bittersweet freedom. The sweet sound of freedom played as a backdrop to their hearing. Despite the joy of finally being exonerated, both men did their best to keep their emotions in check. The weight of years lost and the pain of wrongful imprisonment were visible in their eyes. They knew that, although the court had finally recognized the truth and set them free, the memories of what they had endured would stay with them forever. Even though they are now free and trying to rebuild their lives, the scars of this terrible injustice will never fully fade away. The wrongful conviction has left a mark on their hearts and minds that no amount of freedom or fresh starts can completely erase. Each day, they face the challenge of moving on from a past that was never truly theirs. They have to find a way to integrate into a society that continued without them, while the shadow of the past looms large over every aspect of their lives. For Gregory Counts and Van Dyke Perry, the ordeal is not just about the loss of freedom, but also about the loss of time, years that could have been spent learning, growing, and building a future. Instead, they spent those years fighting a system that was determined to believe a lie over the truth. The pain of knowing that their lives were controlled by a series of false statements and poor decisions made by those in power is something that they will carry with them forever. As one of them said quietly, "It's never going to be over, because it tormented my life. It's my past." Those words capture the lingering sorrow of a life forever changed by a mistake that should never have happened. Now, as they attempt to rejoin society, both men face the daunting task of rebuilding their lives from the ground up. Craig Coley. Craig Coley's case is one of the most shocking and confusing stories in California history. On November 11, 1978, a quiet day turned into a nightmare in Simi Valley, a small suburb near Los Angeles. 24-year-old Rhonda Wicht and her 4-year-old son, Donald, were found dead in her apartment. In a brutal crime, Donald was suffocated while Rhonda was raped, beaten, and strangled. The violence left the community in deep sorrow. Police soon focused on Craig Coley, who had been Rhonda's boyfriend for 2 years. Their recent breakup added a personal angle to the case. A neighbor even said he saw Coley and his truck near the apartment after a loud noise was heard. With this evidence, police arrested Coley on the same day as the murders. His first trial ended with a hung jury, meaning the jurors could not agree on his guilt. In a second trial in 1980, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After his final appeal failed, a judge ordered that all evidence be destroyed. While in prison, Coley served time in several facilities, including the California State Prison in Los Angeles County and Folsom State Prison. His case continued to raise questions among those who believed he might be innocent. In 1989, Detective Michael Bender from the Simi Valley Police Department reopened the case. Detective Bender soon found serious flaws in the original investigation. Coley's parents, a retired police officer and a teacher, had always fought for his freedom, insisting on his innocence. Later, Simi Valley Police Chief Dave Livingstone asked cold case detective Dan Swanson to review the evidence again. Detective Swanson located missing items and sent them for modern forensic tests. DNA testing, not available at the original trial, showed no trace of Coley's DNA on the evidence. Instead, the tests revealed DNA from an unknown person. Investigators also discredited a key witness who had claimed to see Coley at the scene. In fact, 3 police officers later said that the detective in charge during the original trial had either mishandled the case or even framed Coley. Many believed the investigators were too quick to assume his guilt. The case turned dramatically when California Governor Jerry Brown pardoned Craig Coley on November 22, 2017, after new evidence proved he was not responsible for the murders. In February 2018, the California Victims' Compensation Board awarded him nearly $2 million for the almost 40 years he spent in prison wrongfully. Then, on February 23, 2019, the city of Simi Valley agreed to a $21 million settlement with him. City manager Eric Levitt explained that money cannot undo the past, but the settlement was a step toward justice for both Coley and the community. His nearly 39-year prison term remains one of the longest wrongful imprisonments in California for someone later found innocent. Kirsten Blaise Lobato. In a dramatic turn of events, all charges against Kirsten Blaise Lobato were dismissed on December 29, 2017, following a motion by the Clark County District Attorney's Office. After nearly 16 long years in prison, Lobato's release marked the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of new hope for justice. Lobato's case began in 2001 when she was just 18 years old and charged with the brutal murder of Duran Bailey, a homeless man in Las Vegas. Bailey's body was found next to a dumpster in a bank parking lot on July 8, 2001. The injuries were horrific: his eyes swollen shut, his skull cracked, several teeth knocked out, his carotid artery cut, and his penis removed. These gruesome details shocked the community and led to a high-profile trial. But there was more to the story than the grim facts might suggest. 2 months before the murder, in late May 2001, Lobato was attacked in a motel parking lot in Las Vegas. A man had tried to rape her, and in a desperate bid to save herself, she used a small knife given by her father to slash at the attacker's groin. She managed to escape, and in the days that followed, she told several people about the incident. Importantly, she described the event as taking place in a motel parking lot, not near a dumpster, and mentioned that the attacker was alive and mobile when she fled. Then, on July 20th, 2001, police received a call from a resident of Panica who claimed that Lobato had admitted to cutting off a man's penis in Las Vegas. Based on this single tip, detectives drove 3 hours from Las Vegas to Panica to question her. During the questioning, Lobato recounted the attempted rape from May. Unfortunately, her detailed account was mistaken for a confession to Bailey's murder, even though it clearly did not match the facts of the crime. At trial, the case against Lobato rested almost entirely on her statement to the police. There was no physical or forensic evidence linking her to the murder. Many family members and neighbors testified that she was in Panica on July 8, 2001, a full 3 hours away from the scene where Bailey's body was found. Yet, the prosecution relied heavily on a medical examiner's estimate of the time of death, arguing that Bailey had died early on July 8th, when Lobato could not have been in Panica. The turning point came during a 5-day hearing in October 2017. Lobato's defense introduced 3 forensic entomologists, experts in the study of insects, who explained that if Bailey had died much earlier, his body would have been covered with blowfly eggs. Blowflies are known to lay their eggs on a body very soon after death. However, when Bailey's body was examined, no blowfly eggs were found. In addition, a forensic pathologist observed that the state of rigor mortis suggested Bailey died in the early evening on July 8th. This scientific evidence strongly supported Lobato's claim that she was in Panica at the time of Bailey's death. Realizing that key experts had not been called at her original trial, Judge Stephanie Miley reversed Lobato's murder conviction on December 19, 2017. With all charges dismissed shortly after, Lobato was finally set free. Her case is a clear reminder that justice can sometimes be delayed and that every piece of evidence matters. It also highlights the importance of proper legal defense and a thorough investigation to make sure that innocent people are not wrongly punished. After years of suffering, these innocent people finally got their freedom, but no amount of time can truly make up for what they lost. So, what do you think? Should the justice system do more to compensate the wrongfully convicted, or is there no way to truly fix such a devastating mistake? Let us know in the comments.